everybody, it's Kamal Fernandez here from Kamal Fernandez Dog Training, sporting my Kathy Santo t-shirt with my very good friend Kathy Santo, all the way from the sunny USA. So I wanted to have this conversation with Kathy, inspired by the blog that I just posted, which was talking about this is my 30th year of dog training. God, that makes me sound incredibly old. But as I said in my blog, I'm only 21, so I don't know how the 30 years happened, but there you go. And I thought it'd be really interesting to hear and discuss Kathy and I's experience and journey into the world of dog training, and certainly, specifically, being a professional dog trainer, and maybe share some of our insight and experience for those of you that are contemplating it and that are coming up. So thank you, Kathy, for your time. How's things over with you? Incredibly busy, I'm assuming.
Super busy because lots of people are getting puppies.
Yes.
Yay!
Yeah. And is the school busy? And you've obviously got the school, you've got the home boarding, loads of fingers and loads of pies.
Yes, and then the online training and the Zoom calls, and we have a great team, and we're just so grateful to be able to help.
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously, this is a really surreal time for, I think, everybody across the globe, but it definitely reiterates how it is really important, when, certainly from a business point of view, how to create a sense of community within your business. And I think that's something that's really, really key, which we're going to talk about. But just before we jump into the more the intricacies of being a professional in this industry, just give us a little bit of insight into how you got into the world of dog training, Kathy.
Well, I grew up with a dog, and my parents said that when I was 5, I said I wanted to be a dog trainer, which was really strange because I didn't know anybody was a dog trainer, but I just liked playing with my dog. And so through a lot of cold cuts that my mother didn't know I was actually using, at dog, I would teach her to do tricks. And I think that's how a lot of dog trainers start. You have that interest. And it stuck with me my whole life. There was a blip during high school. I thought, I'm going to train killer whales and dolphins. But that didn't go anywhere, obviously. Yep. And I moved out when I was 19 and decided to do my own thing. The last thing my mother said to me as I drove out the driveway was, "Don't get a dog." And Atlanta, Georgia. Yeah. And the first thing I did before I got to my apartment was
get a dog.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how I started. I joined a terrible obedience class, and I was like, I could do this better. There were some competition people, and I was fascinated with that. Then somebody said, I said I wanted to get another dog, because you know how that is. Now you're going to get because I had a little mixed breed, and I wanted to get something I could compete with. Yep. And so people were like, well, if you get a dog and you get it from the newspaper ad, make sure you quiz the person. And I found a newspaper called Front and Finish, and that was on the instructor's table. And she said, yeah, you could take it and read the articles. And it was all about competition obedience. And it was an ad for a puppy from Reggie, which is a very famous golden retriever in the state. Stardust Metapon Reggie. But since it was in a paper, I called Diane Bauman, and I read her the riot act. Like, I just want to know, do you know what you're doing?
So, just for those of you that don't realize, why this is so humorous is Front and Finish is a really prominent obedience-focused magazine in the States. It's like the national one. It is the magazine that people go to. So in the UK, there would be an equivalent, I'm sure, and definitely for obedience there is. But the Diane Bowman, who Kathy is referring to, is one of the greats in American obedience, and she's had an infinite amount of success. So incredibly knowledgeable person. And here's this fresh out the box, know it all, jump start, quizzing Diane Bowman, that's a bit like, it's just ironic, but go on.
And she humored me. I had questions that my friends at the dog school gave me, and she had a puppy left, and she said I could have it, and I would have to drive. I was in Atlanta at the time. I drove to New York to get it, so I went back to the dog school the following week. I'm like, I got a puppy, and they're like, really? I said, yes, from the paper. And they're like, did you do your quizzing? And I said, yes, I did. And they said, so where are you going? And I said, it's Diane Bauman. They're like, you quizzed Diane Bauman? Drove to New York, got the puppy. Diane really liked me, and I started training the puppy for competition obedience. I taught the broad jump backwards, And she helped me every step of the way. I would send her a videotape, and I'd put it in the mail, and it would her a week later. And then she'd look at it, and I would call her at the design time, and I would say, okay, so here's my problem. This is what's happening. How do I fix it? Yeah. She said, you think you should fix it. I'm like, I don't know. That's why I'm calling you. Yeah. She's like, come up with 3 solutions and call me back in a couple of days. I'm like, are you kidding me? Yeah. So then I started to attend some of her camps. And at some point when the dog I had was winning, we had moved to Florida at that point. She was like, you have a real knack for this. Like, I want you to teach at the camps that I teach all over the U.S.
Wow. And
so I started doing that. I was like 20, standing in front of people with 30 years obedience under their belt. And I don't know how I know. I get a sense of this. And then she and I wrote a book together. And then I sort of moved on to the path of using food, which she wasn't doing at that point. And then Terry Arnold came into the picture. And I mean, and then from Terry, there's just so many people. And then you sort of pick and choose from what you hear and what you see. And so much of my time back in the 80s, because I'm much older than you, I watched.
We don't ever admit that, Kathy. We never admit that.
I also am 21.
Exactly, yeah.
But I couldn't watch people. Like, I'd go to the games tournaments that they used to have in the U.S., and I'd be a competitor, but I would spend most of my time at the rings watching warm-ups, watching, why were they doing it? And just, yes, that's for me. No, that's not. Or there's something in the middle. I to this day, like, I can't learn enough. I'm fascinated by the whole word of it.
Yeah. It's so many parallels to our journeys into sort of dog training. It's similar, very, very similar, as I detailed in my blog, and that I got my pet dog, and then I stumbled into the world of dog training after actually seeing Greg Derrett, a very, very, very famous agility handler from the UK. He won the junior handling stakes at the junior handling competition at Crufts, and Greg's probably a couple of years older than me. So maybe 23, 24, something like that. And he won that competition. I thought, well, if he can do it, then I can do it. And bearing in mind, I didn't have a dog at this point. Slight little glitch in my plan, but therefore the seed was sown. And I actually it's ironic because I actually wanted to do agility first. And just by a series of events, I got into competition obedience. But very, very similar in the sense that I used to watch and scrutinise. I used to go to dog shows and scrutinise people's training and what they were doing and the way they'd move their hands or how they'd handle their dogs or what they were rewarding them with and, how they were handling them. And I would sort of, I suppose, being able to learn to read people and read dogs and seeing, I'd be able to deduce in my mind, well, that wouldn't work because that happened or that didn't work and so forth. Oh, your dog did that meant, which is so ironic because I was almost building up this library of being able to assess and deduce a problem or foresee a problem, which is basically my job now. So it's ironic how things fall into place. And then when I got into saying, it was really interesting you're saying about, your version of Diane and the videotapes was like a precursor to Zoom calls now, isn't it, really, how things have evolved. But when I first, my first major competitive instructor was the world-renowned Sylvia Bishop, who is, she lives very locally to me, and she's, an absolute legend in terms of dog training. And when I first got my obedience dog, I went to her avidly. But the person that because I was, how old was I, 14? And we used to go in her 2-seater car. She was a dog warden. She had my dog's brother. We used to travel down. And then she got pregnant with her daughter. And because she had a 2-seater car, she couldn't take me anymore. So I was like absolutely devastated, thinking, oh my God, how am I going to function? But the ironic thing, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Because whilst, Sylvia was a huge support and I would weekly ring her up and catch up and, what's going on and how, anything that I had to, and she was a huge source of support. And periodically when I could, I would go down and have, if I could catch a lift with somebody, I'd go down and have a lesson with her. But there was a huge interim time between when I stopped training with her and when I got my license that I had to largely fend on my own. And then even then, when I did get my license, I wasn't able to, because of various commitments, college and etc. I wasn't be able to go as I regularly as I to train with her on a regular basis. But what it did is it allowed me to fend a little bit for myself. So in whilst she was a great support, and if I was in the middle of training and something went wrong, I'd have to think on my feet and work out what to do. And then I'd go back and say, oh my God, the world's fallen apart, this has happened. And she would say, yay, nay, oh, what did you do? And it allowed me, whilst it was great for support, it allowed me a little bit to fend for myself, which now, I look back at the time, I can remember being absolutely devastated, thinking, oh my God, I've got the dog, I'm ready, I'm going to get this dog to crafts, he's going to be a champion. And, oh my God, and my trainer's now gone. But the irony is that it's the reason why I do what I do now, and I'm able to do my job because I was able to work out some things on my own, which made me a better dog trainer. So obviously, did you ever have a real job then? Did you ever have a real, like, not a dog training job? Did you ever do anything else?
When I was in Atlanta, when I first went down, I had a secretary position. And then you only did it really to get the money to train your dogs.
Yeah.
But I think that the blessing of like being moving from Atlanta to Florida, and so the blessing of not having Diane with me and accessible frequently was it made me creative. It made me afraid to fail because if I wasn't trying, then I wasn't training because a week or 10 days to get word back from her, and she's just going to figure it out my damn self. So so that was good, and there wasn't anybody in the area that I resonated with that I wanted to train with, but I certainly did a lot of watching. And I almost think that now with so much available on the internet, it might be a case of people are seeing all the information, reading all the information, watching all the videos, and not actually doing. And that's the blessing of that time for me, because I was training my dog, and then people saw me training. They're like, "Will you train my dog?" I'm like, "Sure, I'll train your dog." And figured it out. So many dogs passed through my hands.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had an opportunity to do a program with them. And then I moved from competition to pets.
Yeah,
because pets, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting you're saying about. I think both of us, it was really. We both had a mentor which we largely sort of really followed and believed and trusted, and I think that's a huge thing. I think sometimes with the internet nowadays you can have so many opinions about how you're gonna what dog training path, and I think there is something to be said for narrowing it down and identifying a person or a philosophy or a training approach that resonates with you, and really sticking to that for your base understanding. If there's somebody that you really gravitate to, really follow how they train and immerse yourself in their principles. And then once you have confidence, then you can branch out and add things to it and grow or change, which certainly for me, I took my training on a different route. And although that underpins a lot of what I do, there is more things that I've added to it. But there is something to be said for having that really, really sound base point to start on with. And again, having somebody that can guide you and support you, whether it's like literally or in a more sort of a distance learning, etc. There's so many mediums that we can use. I think certainly getting into this world, certainly now, I kind of like the fact that we didn't have so many options in terms of, because I think it could be quite overwhelming for those people that are contemplating being a professional dog trainer. There is so much information. There's so many different strands of thinking and thoughts and philosophies and training methods and who's right and who's wrong, and are you positive? Are you positive enough? If you're not positive, and it gets really, really complicated. And like Kathy said, I think that for me, the greatest blessing I have ever had was I just trained dogs. I trained, and I mean, you're talking thousands and thousands of dogs now that I've trained over my 30-year career or 30-year involvement of dog training. It's literally thousands and thousands of dogs. And just training them and learning to develop your feel of interacting with them, working out what works for one isn't going to work for another, and about their sensitivities, what works, how they to environments, what motivates them, and then making your adjustments in your handling and being able to. I'll often have a student's dog, whether it's domestic dog or behavioural problem or a competition dog, and there'll be something and I just can't quite get it, but if I get my hands on the dog, I can instantly tell you what the issue is. And the only way you acquire that is just getting your hands dirty and getting hold of dogs and training them.
And I think that being allowed to think and not being constricted by this is the way to do it was a great blessing. It was a gift that you think you were getting at the time. You're like, oh, this is so annoying. Just tell me what to do. And was smart enough not to. And when I eventually moved back to Jersey, that was the last dog I competed with before all the kids. And I think we share the same thing. I was voracious. Like I wanted knowledge and I was training her the one way I knew, and it wasn't working out. So I threw my carcass in the car once a week, 5 a.m, drove 3 hours to Terry Arnold to take an hour, drive 3 back home. So that's 7 hours of my day to spend an hour training, but I needed to know. And then I had that great absence from competition training, but I still was doing a lot of pet training. What I'm really enjoying now is sort of hanging with you with the dogs I'm bringing back to competition. And I love working with Betsy Scupio, who was competing when I was competing back in the day. She was married to, and she's wildly successful. But I love the give and take of that, because some of what we're talking about is like, I remember that. Some of it is the innovation of how it's changed in the 20 years that I've been absent for. I love learning. I'll do this forever. Like,
I think the thing to say, and like, that mantra of, find a job you love and you'll never work a day. And it's so true in that we both are very, very committed to our craft, so to speak. We have a desire to keep learning. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly, trying to better myself and to improve my understanding and being open enough to, hear other perspectives of thought. And I think it's certainly, the easiest thing for, once you've been in this sport or this game for a little while, is to be entrenched in your way of thinking as, this is what I do, and that's the end of the conversation. And I think that a great piece of advice that I would urge people to follow is be open to other people's opinions, because be humble, be open to other people's take on things, and be willing to learn and almost discard everything that you know if you believe there's a better path, and be and that isn't to say what you did was right or wrong or different. It's just being open to listening and being open to certainly having your perspectives challenged, and because that's what it allows you to grow and be better at what you do.
And sometimes you hear things and you're like, oh wow, that's wild. Hey, have a nice day. And then years later you're like, oh, you know what?
There's something to that.
And there's something in there for me. Maybe it's not all of it, but maybe there's a piece of it. And you just have to get encyclopedic about the things that you acquire, whether it's from yourself or whoever's your mentor, and so hold on to that. And then you'll see. Here's what I say to people: becoming a dog trainer, if you've not been, and I have 2, or actually I have 3 girls that are mentoring under me to become trainers. And I said, a trainer is like if somebody handed you a box of puzzle pieces and it didn't have the picture on the cover, and you dump it all on the floor, and I say put it together, and you're like, I can't do that. And like, first we'll do the corners, we'll put the foundation, then we'll do the and that's like how to teach basics. And then the middle part, that's the proofing, that's the problem solving, that's the why of it, and that's how it goes. And you just have to be patient and stop jumping place to place to place to place. Like, find a seat, sit in it, and learn the whole thing, and go out and, change up what you're going to do. And maybe act, and maybe create your own thing. That's really what it's about.
Absolutely. And another key thing to take away is, and you mentioned it, is to not be afraid to fail. It is inevitable that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to call something wrong. You're going to, you're going to make the bad judgment. That's inevitable. You're going to, either with your own dogs, with other people's dogs, with your client's dog, you are going to probably get something wrong. And the thing I would say is, as long as you are learning from that experience, then there is something to be gained from it. You can make a bad call, you can make a bad judgment, you can, I know for me personally, my delivery of how I used to teach was much more, do as I say, not as I do type of thing, or certainly do as I say, rather than now it's much more like, okay, how can I get this person to understand? Because, and understanding that it's not just about the dog, it's about the person as well. Unless I can communicate with the person, I'm not going to be able to communicate with the dog. For me, you know, my journey from the profession that I did was a police officer majorly helped me with having empathy and understanding, compassion for, you know, dog training is often a symptom of people's lives, and their dog training behavioural issues is often part of a larger issue, and it's having empathy towards that and being able to be compassionate towards people, which I would say when I first started out I absolutely was not. I was like, well, if I'm going to do it, you can do it, and if I say, you know, because that was my attitude, I didn't have life experience, you know. So I think that's something to be mindful of, you know. You take and I always say to people that skills for dog training aren't just unique to skills for dog training, they're transferable. So if you have success in another field, bring that into what you do, in order to be, certainly for if you want to be a professional dog trainer, and do this on a level where you're going to create an income and you're going to provide for your family, then you need to be thinking about, you know, being a professional in your conduct and customer relations, etc., etc. How about yourself, Kathy? Any insight into that bit of it?
Just about to say the people part, because so many times I've heard, you know, people, dog show people and beyond, I've heard a few of them say, I love dogs, can't stand people. Mm-hmm. And I never understood that, because I love my students like their family. My team would the same thing. I have such compassion for where they are on the journey they're at. Some of them have a dog and they got it for their kids, and some of them have a dog and then, you know, they had a family member get cancer. Like, there's so many human journeys underneath all the things that you're seeing. That if you don't understand them and you don't have empathy for them, you're never going to help them with the dog.
Yeah, absolutely.
It has to be about that thing. And I always tell them, too, that the dog that they got is the dog they're supposed to have at the moment. Yeah. So there's something to learn from it. Yeah. And whether dog training, like, straight up, or whether it's the interaction with me, which leads them to something else, or somebody in class that they become a best friend of. There's a reason this dog is in their life. Yep. We're going to be there with them. And that's the other thing about the school. And I have a huge team, and we have a 24/7 policy, meaning if you need me or any of us, you text in, and we have the cool service that allows us all to see the text. Because I literally mean that every single person who trains with me is a family member. Yep. And whether they train for a few years and then they go away and they come back 10 years later, like, they're part of us, and we want to do good for them because we want to do good for the dogs.
Yeah, and it's taking that sense of pride in what you do, isn't it? I mean, I think whilst I'm a great believer in having a sound basis in understanding, whether it's by following a particular methodology or principle or ethos or mentor, or having some sort of accreditation and understanding, whether it's, so my personal understanding was I studied psychology, which underpinned my dog training understanding, and obviously having a basic understanding of learning theory, which I then was able to apply to my dog training, as it were. So I had that basic understanding. However, there is nothing to substitute just training dogs and applying the principles that you've learnt online or in a class or from a book to the real thing. Because whilst a book, and you know, I've written a book, Kathy's written a book, whilst books are great and for knowledge and information, there is nothing like just learning by feeling your way through it, and again, not being afraid to test things, and not only with dog training, but also the bit that books don't always teach you when you're from a professional point of view is how to engage with people and how to deal with difficult clients and how to reach that difficult client, and how to, you know, if you're delivering a seminar, how to deliver information in a way that captivates the audience, and to how to structure a seminar so that it flows and it goes from one thing to another, how to present appropriately. So all those skills, in fairness, they came from my other professional life, and hence why I was able to draw on those and bring it into my professional entity as a dog trainer, as a professional dog trainer. And same for Kathy. You know, there is, you know, when you hold a class, you are delivering information. You're putting your teacher head on, and then you have to flip to your dog training head. Then you have to go into your psychology head. Then you have to be a therapist. There's so many facets to what we do, and it's being aware of all those entities going on simultaneously.
And I've always thought that if somebody doesn't understand something, that it's my fault.
Yeah.
whether it's my dog or my student or their dog. It's on. And your person you're teaching is, in essence, the teacher and the student at the same time. They're your student, but they're their dog's teacher. So their job is huge, and you can't be upset with them, or they don't understand from me in the way they need to hear it, so they can be the best trainer. It's also teaching them that when they fail, it's just part of learning, and failure moves you forward, because then you know what not to do. When you run out of what not to do, the only thing left is the right thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's it's really just to reiterate, you are there to, as a professional, you are there to communicate not only with the dog but also the person, and to if they aren't receiving your information, think about how you can change it to make it more make that connection with them, whether it's a case of physically showing them, whether it's a case of allowing them to experiment and trial and error, whether it's drawing a picture on a whiteboard, or giving them written instructions. All people learn differently. Recently I had a bit of an epiphany with one of my students who I would try my normal approach to teaching, and it just, something wasn't clicking with her, and I realized that her profession is creative. She's a creative person by profession. She's an interior designer and a gardener. So all her vocations are creative. So I realised that when you're creative, you don't sort of have strict instructions to follow. It's very much more organic. So I adapted my teaching, and then what I would say to her now is, what I want you to achieve is this, and what you've got is this, and I want you to work out in the middle. And that liberated her from being too confined to a box. How she specifically got there, was a little bit, I allowed her a little bit of space to do so, because I knew that as long as I said to her, this is what you've got and this is what you need, and I only set her an achievable step, she would nail it. But if I tried to say, right, I want you to do it this way, she'd be so concerned about following the instructions on the box that she would inevitably get it really, really bad, or get it wrong. Whereas if I just said to her, right, you've got this and I want this, you figure it out. So that would be like me saying to her, I want you to choose a colour, and I want it to capture this mood, or this is for this room, and she'd be able to pinpoint it like that. And it was the same sort of mindset that I applied, principle that I applied to teaching her, which was a massive epiphany. Now other students I have, they want absolute, like, right, what is it that I have to do? Tell me how to do that. And that's, as a teacher, you have to adapt to the individual. I personally encourage my students to think for themselves, and again, don't be afraid to make mistakes. I'm here to support you because I want them to be capable in their own right, and I absolutely adhere to the mantra, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day, give him the means to fish, and he'll eat for life. And that very much is how I teach. How about yourself, Kathy, about teaching styles?
I definitely want to know the client. They're all unique, and that starts with what you're saying, like, what do they do for a living? Are they accountants? Are they dancers? Are they parents? And that really impacts the teaching. Also, it impacts what's on their plate. They have a newborn baby. Like, you have to understand what's going on in their life. And I was also thinking, when you say to people who want to be trainers, get your hands on dogs, some of them don't even have dogs. But I was thinking back to when I was in Florida. I went to a shelter and I just said, hey, you want me to help temperament test dogs? Trainer, because I had been a trainer for a whole year. And they were like, yeah, we'd love to. And I would go to the shelter, didn't even need me. And that's a real proving ground, because who tells you who the dog is? It's the crate card. And it says, mix a poo, given up, and they don't have a reason. So you go in a leash and some food, and you're just like, it's throwing up a prayer. You go, and sometimes they're not aggressive, like the card said, and sometimes the card says, loving dog, and you find yourself like up against a wall going, I could sure use somebody to help me. Those moments where you're alone and it's you and your wit and you're out on the fly, that really make you a dog trainer. So if somebody doesn't have access to a dog, go volunteer at the shelter.
Absolutely, that's a great piece. So again, coming back to my own personal journey, when I was at college, I was like, okay, I'm going to be a dog trainer, and I was 18, 19, and again, my mentor said, no, it's not the right time. you need to do other things. You need to go and get hands on dogs. And I actually went and worked in a boarding kennel, which dealt with lots of cruelty cases as well, and seized dogs, so dogs seized under the Dangerous Dogs Act, and also we had like an influx of dogs from RSPCA cases. So real broad spectrum, from bog stand pet dogs to real extreme levels of dangerous dogs. And again, it was just handling them on a day-to-day basis. And I was there for about maybe 18 months, 2 years, something like that. And it was the best experience for hands-on dog, because again, like you say, the owner would drop the dog off. They would say, oh yeah, he's a sweetheart, da, and you'd find you'd be like held to the no. Another one would be scared out of his brain. When you got it, it'd be absolutely fine. Same with the rescue dogs. You wouldn't have any information about them. You have to, get them comfortable, build a rapport, get them, in a routine, yada, yada, yada. And it was just dogs. And it just helped me really, really hone my skills. Handling dogs and, dogs in stressful situations, being able to make them happy and connect with them. And then I did board and trains, a bit like you. So I used to train dogs regularly. Again, random dogs that people would drop off. They'd be in for 2 weeks residential. I had to make a massive impact in a relatively short space of time. So again, like all that stuff, that hands-on dog training, it was where I learnt my trade. So I served my apprenticeship, so as it were. And then obviously I had the experience of competition stuff, but competition stuff can sometimes give you a very narrow margin of dog training experience, in that, they're generally a certain type of dog and the principles are very much about X, Y, and Z. Whereas when you're dealing with domestic dogs or behavioural issues, you have to be a lot more broad. And I think for anybody thinking about being a professional dog trainer, my advice is also to have more than one string to your bow. If you are very sports specific or very specific in what you do, that sometimes can be a little bit you can narrow your opportunity to be successful, or to be working a lot, really, to be truthful. And I think it's really important that you are willing to diversify, certainly if not from a professional, but certainly from a learning point of view. Be open to trying different things. May dabble in a sport, have a little go at it, even if you have no intentions of competing. Try training a very sport-specific task, because it really does hone your skills as a trainer. And then go and work with some behavioural stuff. Do some rescue work. Train some rescue dogs. Do some really difficult behavioural cases. And as I say, learn your craft. And then, as I say, in the contrast to that, teach a very sport-specific skill, because it broadens you as a dog trainer.
Agree. 100%. Yeah. When I started doing more pet work, when I was sort of not doing the competition thing, I loved it. I loved it because I came from such a high level competitive background, where a sit was only good if it was perfectly straight. And then you'd have the pet market and you teach a dog to sit and it was crooked as hell, but it sat the first time. And people are like, oh my gosh. And then you realize the gravity of that is the sit that I got in the ring earned me a point. The sit that I gave those people dog in their life, it gone to the shelter. So then I was like, feels really good. And so that's kind of what it is. Every day I wake up and I could tell you 25 different stories just from today about how I helped change somebody's life and improve a dog's life. And
absolutely.
Amazing.
I think that's the thing that really was impactful for me, in that I have had several really, really profound lessons from my students, actually, without them even knowing, and about measuring my expectations against them, and aligning yourself to what your client or student or pupil wants. So one that springs to mind was somebody I trained years ago, and she had a German Shepherd, and this dog was just outstanding, absolutely, just had champion written on its forehead. And I was like, she came to me with some problems with it, and I was like, right, you need to pull this dog out of the ring, and we need to strip it all back and go right back to basics. And she was like, yes. And then she came back, whatever it was, and she came back with her rosette, and I was like, wow, that's amazing you got a rosette when you shouldn't be competing with it, but okay, I get it. And this was a consistent theme throughout our training. So I would say pull the dog out, and she would do it a little bit, and then she'd dabble. She couldn't help herself. Anyway, so it come to a bit of a head where I was getting frustrated with her not taking my advice. And I said, okay, do you know what? I don't think this is going to work. I don't think I can teach you anymore. So I very, graciously said, I don't think this is working. I wish you all the best, etc. And so I stopped training her. I felt that was the right thing to do. And I rocked up at a show. Time surpasses. Go to the show, one of the last shows of the year, which is always, it's outdoors and it's torrential rain. And I get to the show to park, and there she is in her rain jacket, torrential rain, parking people. This is the 2-day show. I leave the show on the first day, there she is, parking people. I turn up the next day, there she is, parking people. I go home on the second day, there she is, parking people and clearing the venue of rubbish bags. And it was an epiphany moment, and I go, it isn't just about, it wasn't about her dog being a champion. This was her way of life. This was her social outlet. This was her sport that she'd been immersed for 40, 50 years. She loved it for what it was. And my lesson was, align yourself with what the client/student wants. Not what I want, not what I think they want. I have to understand what they want. If they want their dog to be, a really well-behaved pet dog and they're happy with what they've got, great. If they want to go to the World Championships, great. But it isn't about me, and it isn't about my ego. My job is to facilitate them being successful, not for me to get my pat on the back and say, yes, somebody's won crafts or, made up a champion. That isn't the goal. The goal is to align yourself with what your student wants, and then be the medium to facilitate their success, not yours.
I think in the beginning when I started, with the pet people, like no dogs on bed and no dogs, by you at the table. And it was, that's just how it wasn't for me. That's what I thought was how everybody should live with their dog. And they weren't coming from competition backgrounds. They got a dog, hang out with it. Yeah. So over the years, I've relaxed how I perceive things, and dogs on beds are fine. Listen, if you don't have a dog who's biting you or your kid, right, there's aggression, possession, resource, and we've got basic training under our belts, and you make your dog earn his life and all that good stuff. You want the dog on the bed or on the couch, as long as you invite it, as long as you can ask it to leave, and it will, as long as you're controlling the reinforcement, okay with it. And it hadn't been like that in the beginning, and that's what I've come to. Everybody has a different standard. One okay like this, and it may not be how I would live with the dog, but the dog is for them. It wasn't for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think so, obviously, you have a really big school where you are in New Jersey. I travel the world, and I teach, a lot of people, and I have my online entity. But for me, the biggest thing to protect more than anything is your reputation, and your reputation for me is your calling card. So I hope, and I like to think that people have a positive outlook on the experience of where they might not necessarily go, I want to train with Kamal, but they can say he is professional, he gave me 100%, he was really committed, etc., or I really enjoyed his seminar. I may or may not want to do that or whatever. That's fine, but your reputation and your calling card as a professional is the thing that you absolutely need to guard with your life, because that's really how people, you might have all the qualifications under the sun, but if you don't treat people with kindness and with compassion and with humility, and are present when you're working with them, forget it. Just you're going to have a very, very short window of success or a career in this game. How about yourself? What's a pearl of wisdom?
Takes 30 years to build your reputation. Takes seconds to destroy it.
Absolutely, yeah.
I have to say, she loved her students, she loved her team, she loved the dogs. That's how I want it to be, and that's what it is every single day. And it's not, I don't have to wake up and say, okay, now I'm going to be really nice to people. It's not. I mean, I wake up every day, I can't wait to get to school and share with my team. And seeing it from their eyes, that's just like when your kids are little. Well, your kid is little. My kids are little. And, it was Christmas and Santa Claus. I have all these trainers and all these play care team members, and they're seeing things like for the first time, like, oh my God, I remember when I saw a dog able to do that. And it's just sort of reliving that thing that sparked that fire in you that just still burning today.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really the fact passion is a huge thing, and for me the other key thing is authenticity, and that be authentic in what you do. So if you're aspiring to be a professional dog trainer, if you are coming into this thinking that you are going to have your own TV show and you're going to be a celebrity, forget it. That is like the chances of that happening are slim. You have to do this because you enjoy your work, you want to help people with their dogs, you love dogs, certainly I do, Kathy does. It isn't just a ticky box exercise because this is the thing to do. The danger of social media and the internet, etc., today is that it's very easy to create a persona, good marketing, etc. But I suddenly believe that people will see authenticity, and I think they will see if you are genuine in what you do, and whether you genuinely like dogs, and if you genuinely are compassionate about your students, people will see that. And if you want to have longevity, then you need to be authentic. And that whilst you see a lot of people that prominent dog trainers, just don't try and aspire to be them. Don't try and be Kamal, don't try and be Kathy. Be yourself and find your own niche way of being and interacting.
Agree. People who meet me, they say I'm the same person. Well, you've been in my house.
Yep.
In person, in the ring, at a show, at teaching a class, on the radio, on TV, at the house. I'm the same person.
Yep.
And people, oh my God, you're just like you are on whatever. I'm like, yeah, who else would I be?
Yeah.
But the other thing that we probably should briefly touch on is what this life really is. Like the life of a dog trainer, and I do media, and so you might see me around. It is literally, I am up at 5 a.m. and I stop at 7 o'clock at night, and I'm probably emails well into midnight. It's not like I show up, I do my class, and then I walk off into the sunset.
No. If only.
I'm taking care of dogs. I'm training dogs. I'm consoling people. I'm going to pick up a dog at a house. Somebody was rushed to the hospital. I'm going to a shelter to get a dog. I'm all in. I mean, from day one, I knew what this could be and what it would be. And thank God I have a family who is supporting it, and they love it as much as I do. And they know that this business, this school, the training, it's who I am. It's not what I put on.
Absolutely,
it's of my life. And so I think you should surround yourself with those people who are going to do that with you. And people are giving you pushback. I don't know that they should be as close to you as they might be, because you have to follow the path. The path that you want.
And I think that's a really, really good point, in that Kathy and I are very much cut the same cloth, in that we don't do being off work very well. It's like a gun to head, force sit down, do not look at your phone, but or do not it's just not doable for us. But then that's the nature of who we are, and I think that's what allows us to do what we are to the level that we do. And I'm not saying that everybody's going to be teaching seminars across the world and doing media, etc., like Kathy does, or that you don't have to do it to that level. But it certainly, for me, because I'm so passionate about my job, I'm an all-in person. Now, if that isn't for you, it's not to say that you can't have a balance of, okay, I'm going to do some teaching, and then I'm going to do some dog boarding, and having that little bit of differentiation, and then say, okay, I'm going to have X amount of time. If you are the person that can do that, I take my hat off to you. That's not my personality, that's not Kathy's personality, and that doesn't say we're right or wrong. It's just understanding that this vocation can be all-consuming. And I think that's something to anybody aspiring to be a professional dog trainer. It isn't always just, it takes time to get to the point of where you're going to be, writing a book and being on television and all that sort of stuff. You need to start with the hard yards of, doing your classes, going to the shelter, putting the work in, and sort of and serving due diligence to get to the point of where you can, cherry pick the jobs that you want to do, and focus more on the things that you're more interested in, etc. But for the beginning part, it really is a little bit hard yards, and you've got to be willing to commit to that process. And I think that's the case, to be fair, with a lot of jobs.
It is, and I think anything that I do on a media level, I didn't seek out any of it. Every single thing, from the book to the column to the AKC or any of the TV that I do, that was just somebody saying, oh, you know what, I've seen your stuff, I really like you, would you do this? And you know that my mantra is always say yes. With another client or another hour or doing another, and like when I sat down with you, this had been 10 hours since I'd been in my house, and I was working the whole time. But that's how I like it. Like the hardest day for me would be a day where I wasn't teaching.
Snap. I think, and like, you know, obviously now at the moment because of COVID, I'm doing a lot of online stuff, so I'll be doing online classes, and I'll be doing an online console, or I'll be doing some stuff on my various groups, so it's constant throughout the day, and you know, somebody will post a video, I'll review it, etc. So it's being it's understanding that it can be all consuming, but like I said, if it's something that you're really passionate about, I urge people. For me, it's the best. You know, I love my job, and I wouldn't do anything else. You know, absolutely. You know, like a bit like you, I can see me, you know, in the middle of a class or teaching somebody, killing over and going, okay, that's it, Kamal's done. You know, stick a fork in him and he's done.
No, you teach the whole class.
First,
You're doing the whole time.
Absolutely, yeah. But no, hopefully this has been an interesting discussion for those of you that are aspiring to be dog trainers, from two people that have, you know, very fortunately been blessed to be able to do what we do. I hope it's given you a bit of inspiration and insight into the path of which we've taken to get to where we are, and hopefully continue to do so. And having the humility to know that there is always more to learn, there's always ways to be better, and being committed to your craft, so to speak. Any final points, Kathy?
I think that we hit them all. I mean, you are who I am.
Yeah.
I mean, we stand on the shoulders of those who are kind enough to teach us,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Very much so. And I think that's a really good point to end on, and that, you know, Kathy and I are very, very grateful for those that have gone before and given us the opportunity to develop into what we are, and hopefully this has been insightful for those of you that are thinking about getting into the profession, and ways to do it that will benefit you and bring you as much joy and success, hopefully, in what you do. For me, from Kathy, all the best. Enjoy your dogs and your training. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.